Brothers and sisters in Iman, Assalamu alaikum. Tonight is a Saturday night. Inshallah, we'll start the program with Quran recitation in Arabic and in English. Would you like to recite in Arabic for us, please?
إن الله وملائكته يصلون على النبي يا أيها الذين آمنوا صلوا عليه وسلموا تسليما. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. حاميم والكتاب المبين إنا جعلناه قرآنا عربيا لعلكم تعقلون. وإنه في أم الكتاب لدينا لعلي حكيم. أفنضرب عنكم الذكر سفحا أن كنتم قوم مسرفون. أفنضرب عنكم الذكر سفحا أن كنتم قوما مسرفين. وكم أرسلنا من نبي في الأولين وما يأتيهم من نبي إلا كانوا به يستهزئون. فأهلكنا أشد منهم بطشا فمضى مثل الأولين. ولئن سألتهم من خلق السماوات والأرض ليقولن من خلق السماوات والأرض ليقولن خلقهن العزيز العليم الذي جعل لكم الأرض مهدا وجعل لكم فيها سبلا لعلكم تهتدون والذي نزل من السماء ماء بقدر فأنشرنا به بلدة ميتا بلدة ميتا كذلك تخرجون والذي خلق الأزواج كلها وجعل لكم من الفلك والأنعام والذي خلق الأزواج كلها وجعل لكم من الفلك والأنعام ما تركبون صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. حامیم. By the expository book of the divine truth that we did send this Quran in Arabic, that we send this Quran in Arabic language in order that you will be able to understand it and therefore ponder about it. But therefore ponder about its meaning. And verily, Quran is taken from the mother of the book, which is with us, and it is the exalted wisdom teaching book. Shall we then disregard to send down the reminder which is for all mankind, just because you are an extremely transgressing people? We did send so many messengers to the people of the old, and they mocked at very of them, and they mocked at every of them without any exception. So we did destroy those disbelievers who were much stronger than these pagans of Quraysh, and their stories have been stated in the former revelations. If you, O Messenger, ask them, who is the creator of the heavens and the earth, they will surely say, these were created by the knowing, invincible, mighty. The one who has made the earth a resting place for you, and he has devised for you roads through which you can reach the destination that you aim. And He is the one who sends down rain from the sky sufficiently and raises to life the dead and lack of hair back. And raises to life the dead and lack of hairback lands, and such is the way that you will be raised from your grave in the hereafter. And Allah is the one who created all creatures in pairs and has made for you ships and cattle on which you ride. صدق الله العلي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد وعجل.
Jazakallah, brother. At this time, I'd like to invite Sister Zara Mamdani. Are you ready for tonight? She's going to present the lessons of Karbala for about a couple of minutes here. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Okay, slight change in schedule. Inshallah, I don't want to take up too much time because tonight we do have a special presentation in Hall A. They have put together a play. So I want to make sure that we have ample time in our speech here and ready to go to Hall A at the end of this program. So inshallah, with that, I'll make a quick announcement. Yesterday we had some challenges with the children on the front. So if your son is sitting up here, please make sure they're sitting with you. Let's make sure that we don't have more than 2 kids sitting together at any one time so we can control some of the activities that they're conducting, extracurricular activities. Also on the ladies' side, humble request to lower your voice. I know sometimes you have to talk to your kids and you have to control them as well, but your voice does carry just as loud. So please, out of respect for the speech that's going to be presented. At this time, before I ask the Maulana to come to the member, if you can come to the front and fill up the spaces here before we have more people coming and it becomes a burden for them when they get here. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Inshallah, one request. Starting tomorrow night, we will start to summarize Maulana's speech. So if you want to write a 2-minute or less, really about a minute narrative on what you've heard and what questions you may have for Maulana, please do so. Let me know that you want to present, and inshallah I'll put you on the schedule. At this time, I'd like to invite Maulana Jafar Muhibullah to the front. Bar Muhammad wa ali Muhammad salawat. Al-Fatiha. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان اللعين الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. والحمد لله رب العالمين الولي الحكيم. ثم الصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين أبي القاسم المصطفى محمد. وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين لا سيما بقية الله في الأرضين أرواحنا له فداء. أما بعد،
فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه الكريم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم أفحكم الجاهلية يبغون ومن أحسن من الله حكما لقوم يوقنون صدق الله علي العظيم. اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. As we mentioned yesterday, our topic is about the idea and the concept of an Islamic enlightenment and reform, particularly because Imam Hussein, his whole mission, as he stated from the beginning, was to reform, to do islah of the ummah of his grandfather. The idea of reform and Islamic enlightenment, as we mentioned, at the heart of it is this verse, which is verse 50 of Surah Al-Ma'idah, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He poses this question to the ummah. And in fact, this question is a question that should be posed to mankind in its entirety. أَفَحُكْمُ الْجَاهِلِيَّةِ يَبْغُونَ? Do you desire governance or a judgment that is based on an enlightenment? And who is better to present and to put forth a social system or a system of governance, a system of judging than Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And particularly for those who have certainty, those who understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put forth. And in order to understand what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put forth, that system of governance and judging, of course we have to compare and contrast. We have to see that what is it that we decide or we want, which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He calls al-hukm al-jahiliyyah, governance or judging based on unenlightenment. And what is it that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He has presented, He has revealed in the Quran, and He has sent with His Prophet, the example in His Prophet and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdal salatu wasalam, that it is considered enlightenment. What type of system is that? And of course, one of the comparisons that we can do, definitely all of our youth who have gone to school here or will be soon going to high school and middle school and these type of things, you've heard of the Enlightenment, a period in history where it's considered the Enlightenment. And what that period was and what it was signified, and of course we cannot go through all of the details here, but what it was a move away from tradition. The European country says, okay, well, we don't need to follow tradition anymore. But rather we should rely upon individualism and rationalism. This was the whole motive, in a nutshell. Because they felt that, oh, well, holding to tradition is actually holding us back. Of course, one of the problems there, which is a little bit more deep-rooted, is that there was a conflict also at that time between the church, or what was considered religion, and science. Of course, alhamdulillah, in Islam, we don't have that complexity to that degree. Islam is religion of intellect. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the Quran, He often says, أَفَلَا تَعْقِلُونَ? Do you not think? Do you not reflect? Do they not think? Do they not reflect? So in Islam, we don't have that problem, which led to this decision that, well, we should move away from tradition. We should move away from custom. And I'm not speaking about, okay, our own individual tradition and custom, but that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has established in the Quran, that which the Prophet of Allah and the Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdal salatu wasalam have brought to us. This is the tradition and custom that I'm speaking about. And that tradition and custom does not differ with science, that if something is proven as a fact, then Islam says, yes, it's a fact. Accept it. Reflect upon it. Think about it. If these things are factual statements, Islam has no problem. But what led to the Enlightenment or the European Enlightenment was this idea that was in the church that no, although something could be proven as a fact, they said, no, this is contradictory to the Bible. This is contradictory to religion. If one stated that the earth was round and not flat, they said, no, you can't say that the earth is round. It's flat. And this type of conflict between thinking and pondering and reflecting upon things which are factual, things which can be discovered, and what was called the tradition. That was not the tradition of Allah, but this was a tradition that had been created, and it was placed upon the idea of religion. So anyway, the Enlightenment period, just in short, and the European Enlightenment, was a move away from tradition to individualism and to what they called rationalism, humanism. There are a lot of different things that kind of grew out of that movement. Whereas in Islam, and what we have been discussing, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says, no, the actual enlightenment is to move towards that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed. To accept what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed in the Quran, to accept the teachings of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdalus salatu wassalam, because in those teachings you will find enlightenment. In those teachings you will gain knowledge. Because as we said before, that enlightenment is based upon knowledge. And as the Prophet said, that knowledge is a light which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He places in the hearts of whomever He wills. And I'm mentioning this as a summary of yesterday's lecture because, mashallah, we have a few people that are here today that were not here yesterday. Because it's important to understand the thought which is being put into these verses and how to understand what the Prophet brought and how to understand what was the mission of Imam Hussein. So if you give us a salawat, we will continue. So Islamic enlightenment and Islamic reform is returning and holding fast to that tradition and custom of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's revelation, the tradition and custom of the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdalus salatu wassalam. And moving away from that is Jahiliyyah. The first characteristic, and we mentioned that there were 6 traits and characteristics of a society that is in the state of unenlightenment, is in the state of Jahiliyyah. The first trait is that society that moves away from Tawheed, that immerses itself in disbelief and defies Tawheed. And inshallah we'll speak about the opposite, those characteristics and traits of a society that is moving towards enlightenment. But we want to focus on, again, first, those traits which the society moves away. So the first is defying Tawheed, the revelation of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, rejecting what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has presented to us, and assuming that with our limited knowledge and limited understanding that we know best what we should do for ourselves. We can guide mankind forever. Although our lifespan is 70 years, 80 years. But we assume that we can put a system in place, and that system is better than anything else. Whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, who has created us, who knows us better than we know ourselves, that He is not able to guide us. He is not able to present to us a system, an order, a means of judging among ourselves, solving our differences, governing our societies, that He is not able to, though He's created us, though He knows us better than we know ourselves. And the interesting thing about this, when we look at this trait or this characteristic that is prevalent in a society that is moving away from what we consider true enlightenment, is not one individual, but it's a group of people who think this way, and they get together. And a lot of times their ideas are not even that cohesive among themselves. But nonetheless, what they agree upon is that, no, we should not follow what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given us. We should not follow the law or the governance that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has put forth, that He has sent with His prophets, not only the Prophet Muhammad, but the Prophet Musa, the Prophet Isa, and all the prophets who have come before. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in Surah Al-Baqarah, verse 118, He gives us an idea about this, that what is the reason for this? That why do this group of people, do they think this way? Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He states, وَقَالَ الَّذِينَ لَا يَعْلَمُونَ لَوْلَا يُكَلِّمُنَ اللَّهُ أَوْ تَأْتِينَا آيَةٌ. They state that, well, only if Allah, He had spoken to us, and He has sent to us a verse, a sign. And again, this is the issue and one of the problems, since we are speaking about the events of Muharram, what led to Muharram, what led to the martyrdom of Imam Hussein, and the events thereafter. We can apply this to the individuals at that time. So their statement is, well, why didn't God talk to us? And on one hand, as Yazid, he stated that he is bringing back the dignity of Bani Umayyah. And before the last revelation, it was Bani Umayyah who had the greatest influence on the direction of society. So their thinking was perhaps, well, if God wanted to send an order, why not talk to us? We're already in a position of power. We're already giving a sense of direction to the society. So why not talk to us and give us a sign rather than Bani Hashim? And we even see this type of thinking today. That when some who try to dispute the position and the status of Ahlul Bayt alayhim afdalu salatu wasalam, immediately they say, well, why do you follow the Ahlul Bayt? This is nepotism. That you're following the family of the Prophet simply because it's the family of the Prophet. But this is not why we follow the Ahlul Bayt. Not simply because they're the family of the Prophet, but because they are the wali, they're the authority, they are the ones who Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has chosen as guides for mankind. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ala Muhammad. So while this argument is presented that, well, why do you follow Ahlul Bayt? That you're falling into nepotism, meaning that you simply follow someone because he's a relative of someone, but they never turn this question back upon themselves. That, okay, well, why was there the Umayyad dynasty, one after another? One son who takes power after his father, the next son, but based on what? What criterion was there? And when we look at the criterion that was used, it was simply because of blood relation. There was nothing special about their knowledge, about their characteristics. And even we find, and this is something that is in Islamic history, that among the Khulafa, that you had one who was a son killing his father so that he can come to power. One brother kills another brother, again, so that he may come to power. But we don't find this among the Ahlul Bayt. The Ahlul Bayt, alayhim afdalu salatu wasalam, the Imams, that they were examples, they were exemplary figures in the history of Islam. They were exemplary people. They were those who were enlightened, and they tried to enlighten others. So one thing we must be clear about, and we must understand, and that is that we should not assume, and this is often what we assume, that, oh, well, yes, the period before the Prophet was a time of Jahiliyyah. It was a time of unenlightenment. And so the Prophet came in the unenlightenment period, the Jahiliyyah has gone. No, we still live in Jahiliyyah. The Prophet, he began and he put into motion the actions which will, yes, remove Jahiliyyah, unenlightenment. Because if Jahiliyyah was completely gone, then Imam Hussein would not have been murdered and martyred in Karbala. If the Jahiliyyah was completely removed, then Fatima Zahra salamullah alayha would not have been martyred shortly after Rasulullah. Yes, the Prophet, he brought this knowledge, he brought the revelation, he presented an example to mankind in order to take them out of Jahiliyyah. But these were the first steps. The knowledge was presented. The means to move away from Jahiliyyah, out of an enlightenment into enlightenment, was there. But of course, as we have stated in Surah Al-Ma'idah, chapter 5 of the Quran, verse 50, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He states at the end, لِقَوْمِ يُوقِنُونَ. Meaning that while this knowledge is there, the means to uplift yourselves, the means to come into enlightenment is there, but you have to make effort. Simply because it's there doesn't mean that some sort of osmosis was happening. Oh, it's been presented, and immediately I understand it. The Quran has been revealed. I know some Arabic, and so immediately I know the entire Quran. No. One has to go forth. One has to make effort to understand. One has to reach that point of, again, certainty. And one of the ways of reaching that certainty, again, is to see the difference. To see the difference between light and day. To see the difference between enlightenment and unenlightenment. This is why when Imam Zaman Ajil Faraj al-Sharif when he comes to complete that mission, to take mankind out of an enlightenment into enlightenment, there's no doubt. There will be no doubt left that what is brought and that governance that is established at that time is the best governance for mankind. There will be no doubt, meaning that mankind will come to this point of certainty. There will be those, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لِقَوْمٍ يُوقِنُونَ. They will be those people who have certainty that there's no governance that we can govern ourselves by except for that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has sent to us. There will be no governance, and this will be certain. And we see this today. That those who rise to power, and even if they rise to power and they say, oh, well, we want to do something good. But then the corruption that begins. The Abbasids, they rose to power based on the motto that, oh, we're going to restore the power back to Ahlul Bayt. We're going to put the family's prophet back in their rightful position, but as soon as they seize control, they begin to kill the Ahlul Bayt. In fact, they killed and murdered more than the Bani Umayyah. So there will be no doubt, there will be certainty among mankind that when Imam Zaman he comes, Hazrat Isa he comes, that there is no governance greater than that which Allah has presented to us. Salawat. So going back to that verse in Surah Al-Baqarah, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He states the philosophy or the reasoning of those individuals who defy Tawheed, a monotheistic system, that they say that, well, why didn't God speak to us? That those who are already in power and have proven that we can gain power, He should talk to us. He should send us the revelation. He should send us this Quran, and then we will, again, govern based on what He sent. Or at least this is what they assume. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He says that many have said that before. وَكَذَلِكَ قَالَ الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِهِمْ مِثْلَ قَوْلِهِمْ تَشَابَهَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ قَدْ بَيَّنَّا الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمٍ يُوقِنُونَ. And He says, yes, if you look, even those who have said this, and this is during the time of the Prophet, because it's a revelation of the Quran, He says, if you look, those who came before the Prophet, they said the same thing. During the time of Hazrat Isa, during the time of Hazrat Musa, during the time of Hazrat Nuh, He says, they all said this. In our present time, we find the same. He says, they've all said this. تَشَابَهَتْ قُلُوبُهُمْ. Their thinking is alike. There's no difference among them. And Allah says, قَدْ بَيَّنَّا الْآيَاتِ لِقَوْمِ يُوقِنُونَ. Again, all of these things are signs for those people who have certainty, or at least who want certainty, those who desire to come into enlightenment. The reason for Yazid rising to power, again, why should he rise to power? Well, my father is the leader, then after him I should be leader. To understand this philosophy, or the thinking and the reasoning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He's presenting in verse 118 of Surah Al-Baqarah, to put it very simply, why him and why these people instead of me? That I should be the one that receives the revelation. I should be the one that is leading. Because of my family relationship, because of this, because of that. And unfortunately, sometimes we see this even in our societies, whether in our countries, in our centers at times. No, well, I'm from here, I should lead. Rather than choosing the best traits that, oh, mashallah, this person, he has more knowledge, so he should lead. This person is a better example. His or her akhlaq is the best. So that person should take the forefront and take the helm. And we should also improve ourselves so that, again, I can walk in the same footsteps as the Prophet and Ahlul Bayt. That, again, these individuals, they do not take the idea of leadership as a responsibility. They think it's, oh, this is my right. Oh, I should be here. Why them and not me? That's the simple philosophy of what they are thinking. This is what makes such individuals defy the principles of Tawheed. And again, we'll speak about those principles of Tawheed a little bit later, from the more positive sense, that what are these principles of Tawheed that the community should be built upon? What are these principles of Tawheed that a society should be built upon? And of course, we quite often, just to give you a glimpse of that, quite often we think, oh, well, Tawheed is simply La ilaha illallah Muhammad Rasulullah sallallahu is their creed, La ilaha illallah wahdahu la sharika, that there's only one God. And it is something that is theological is something that is theoretical. We think about Tawheed, we understand this in a rational manner. Okay, well, what is Tawheed? What is monotheism? And seldom do we look at the pragmatic and the practical aspect of Tawheed. Yes, it begins with the idea of the oneness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, but it ends, and this is something that one of our great scholars, Shahid Mutahari, he mentions. He says, though it begins with an idea, a theological concept, he said, but it ends with a practical measure, and that is a harmony and unity within society, between people. But inshallah, we'll speak more about that later. So those who go against this principle of Tawheed, not only theologically, but even within society, that those who have seized power based on unenlightenment, not based on the principles of Tawheed, that they divide people within the society so that they can maintain power. They divide people, again, as we also pointed out a bit yesterday, on this idea and principle of asabiyya. Al-asabiyya, which yesterday we translated it as prejudice, which is also translated in more academic circles, and we should understand this, is called group solidarity. And this is a term that one of the famous historians, Muslim historians, Ibn Khaldun, that he wrote in his book of history, Al-Muqaddimah. And this is a book that's usually studied in academic circles, is studied, in many Islamic countries. But one of the things that is attributed to Ibn Khaldun says that, well, he's one of the first persons who examine history based on sociological methods. And this is before, again, the idea or the science of sociology was developed. But his method of looking at history, his method of examining history, that why have things developed as they were? And this is Ibn Khaldun, who lived during the 13th century, almost 700 years after the Prophet. And of course, if he's examining society, he's examining history and why things have developed in history the way they are, again, he's seeing these principles of history or of a society and the development of society across time. And he coined this term, al-asabiyya. He says that what is most prevalent throughout history and throughout the different groups. Now, Ibn Khaldun, he lived in Andalus. He was among those Muslims who lived in the western part of the Muslim Ummah at that time. And so at that time there were many different, you had the Fatimids who had risen to power. You had the Abbasids who were falling out of power. You had the Mamluk. So there were different, although you had the Muslim Ummah, you had different governorships. And each of them, they call themselves different names. We're the Fatimids, we're the Abbasids, we're the Ismailis, we're the Mamluks. So he was examining this trend, not only in history and in society, and how these different groups came to power. He says, and they have come to power, and he says, even at the time after Rasulullah. In the period also of Jahiliyyah, that why were the Umayyads during that time, why were they influencing society more so than Bani Hashim? And then when the Prophet came and the revelation was revealed that the Prophet of Allah, that he influenced society. He says the reason, and of course the Prophet was excluded, he says the reason was al-asabiyya. This idea of group solidarity, this idea of what we consider was prejudice. So meaning that this thing or this thinking existed during the time of Ibn Khaldun in the 13th century, 700 years after Rasulullah. But this is a point that we've been making to show that the Prophet, he came to bring mankind into enlightenment, but this was the first step. Because as we mentioned in our speech yesterday, as the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he stated, whoever has a mustard seed, habbatu khirdan min asabiyya, whoever has this mustard seed of asabiyya in his heart, he says Allah will raise him on the Day of Judgment with al-a'rab al-jahiliyyah. But this is not only in our sources as Shia. Yes, this hadith that came from Imam Sadiq that goes back to the Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. But even if we look in the sources of our Muslim brothers of Ahlul Sunnah, perhaps at least among some of them, one of their most reliable narrators, Abu Hurairah, he also has one of a hadith that mentions the same thing, that shows that this idea of asabiyya, again, is part of jahiliyyah, has nothing to do with Islam. But yet, 700 years after Rasulullah, and even till today, this idea of asabiyya, of group solidarity, of prejudice, that it still exists. And it goes completely against Tawheed. Why? Because it does not create harmony. Rather, it divides people in groups. Anyway, Abu Hurairah, just so we can listen or hear what this hadith is. Because again, as Shia, as followers of Ahlul Bayt, alayhim salatu wasalam, we are often asked that, well, it is the Shia who split off. It is the Shia who broke off and created a group. But if we listen to the hadith of Abu Hurairah, if we understand it, then we'll understand, well, who actually broke off? Who actually began to create groups? Who actually began to go against the principle of Tawheed within the society, the Muslim Ummah? The hadith states, the narration states, that the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam he stated, من خرج من الطاعة ومن خرج من الطاعة ومن الجماعة فمات ميتة جاهلية. He says that individual who has gone outside the folds of obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? And has separated himself from the group, from the jama'ah. In other words, separated himself from the ummah. Then that person, if he or she dies in that state, then they have died the death of one who is in unenlightenment. And it's a long hadith, we'll break it down section by section. But we see that the first criterion of leaving outside of the jama'ah or the group or the ummah is that they leave outside the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That their separation is not a separation based on truth and justice. It's based upon sin. It's based upon defying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so here's the question that when it is posed to us, well, Imam Hussein, he left from Ummah. He should have just stayed and made bay'ah. But the question is, did Imam Hussein, did he leave from Medina to defy Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? To defy the order of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? To defy the Quran? Or did he leave based upon obeying Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? And this is from the hadith of our brother. Thereafter, the hadith, it continues stating that وَمَنْ says وَمَنْ خَرَجَ مِنْ أُمَّتِي, and whoever leaves from my ummah, or whoever goes out from my ummah, يَضْرِبُ برها وفاجرها ولا يتحشى مؤمنها. That whoever goes forth in the land, they pillage, from my ummah, they go forth, they leave out, and they begin to pillage the land. In other words, they go out and they fight. And they're not weary or respecting of the believers. مؤمنها. ولا لذي أحدها. Nor are they respecting and honoring the covenants that they have among themselves. And again, the question is that if someone rises, or at least they claim that they are the Khalifa, they claim that they're the successor of Rasulullah, do they not have an ahd? Do they not have a covenant to guide the ummah by what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed in the Quran? To guide the ummah by the example of Rasulullah? Let's say that, okay, if you did not accept the example of Ahlul Bayt, but what is the example of Rasulullah? Is this not a covenant? That you claim that you are an inheritor of Rasulullah? That you are the Khalifa after Rasulullah? And you do not govern by the Quran? Nor do you govern by the example of Rasulullah? And so the Prophet, again, in that hadith, he says, and whoever does this, and who dies based upon that, he says, mata mitatan jahiliyyah. Or if that individual attaches himself to such a principle, يقتل تحت راية أمية. Actually, in this hadith, the Prophet of Allah, he calls this, he says, this is a banner, or is a movement of the blind. In other words, unenlightened. Those who have not understood the Quran, those who have not understood the Sunnah of Rasulullah. And there are several hadith like this. And because there are some of our Sunni brothers, they don't accept Abu Hurairah as a authentic and trustworthy narrator, but from Abu Sulaiman. Again, in the Sunnah of Dawood and Bukhari and Muslim, again, similar statement that they narrate from the Prophet of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. That they narrate, stating that the Prophet, he mentioned, he says, وَمَنْ says, whoever calls, وَمَنْ دَعَى إِلَىٰ عَصَبِيَّةٍ فَلَيْسَ مِنَّا or لَيْسَ مِنَّا مَنْ دَعَى إِلَىٰ عَصَبِيَّةٍ وَقَتَلَ عَلَىٰ عَصَبِيَّةٍ وَقُتِلَ عَلَىٰ عَصَبِيَّةٍ. That individual is not from among me. That individual is not from the ummah of the Prophet, as he is stating, the Prophet is stating. If they call towards this idea of asabiyyah, if they fight based on the principle of asabiyyah, group solidarity, prejudice. In other words, they're not basing their actions and their stance upon tawheed. So the question is, in Karbala, who had based their stance upon tawheed and who was basing their stance simply upon al-asabiyyah? Did Imam Hussein leave out of disobedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala or in the obedience of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? Did he leave from Medina to establish and to reform the sunnah of Rasulullah or to remove it? This is the question we must ask. Or if we are asked that, well, Imam Hussein, he's separate. Our counter question is that who lived by the principle of Tawheed? Because as the Prophet, he says, there's only two types of rules and governance. He says, Al-Hukm Hukman, Hukm Allah wa Hukm al-Jahiliyyah. But there either one or two types of governance that we will follow. Either we will follow that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has revealed, again, coming to certainty and knowing that this is the best way of life, this is the best type of governance, this is the best way to resolve our differences and judge between us, then it's hukm Allah. Otherwise, we will follow hukm al-jahiliyyah, governance and the means of judging between ourselves based on an enlightenment. Which today there are plenty of examples of the products of that. And this is why we see that in many societies, and some societies more than others, that some people are given the green light to kill, while others are not. We see the imbalance in what is called a justice system. It says, oh, this is a system of justice. You come to a court of law and at least you're supposed to be proven, you're innocent until proven guilty. In some places you're guilty until proven innocent. But this is the system that is created. Some are guilty and we know they're guilty, but, oh, well, you're from the right family or right color or the right this or that, and so, well, we're going to give you a break. Whereas the other person, he's not from the right family. He doesn't have the connection. He may not have the right skin color. Oh, well, we're going to throw the book at you. This is because it is a system of unenlightenment. It's not a system of justice. It's not a system of governing and ruling and judging between yourselves based on what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala He has revealed. Because that system, as the Prophet has stated, and we mentioned, he says, there's no difference between someone who's Arab, who's not Arab, who's black, who's white. No. Everyone will be just the same. Even to the point that the Prophet of Allah, he was asked, he says, but what about your daughter? What about Fatima? If she broke these laws, what would you do? The Prophet says that even if she broke the law, then she will be held responsible in the eyes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. She will be held responsible. But of course we know the status of Ahlul Bayt. And this is why they were placed as examples. This is why they were placed as examples before us. And this is something, again, that for those who desire enlightenment, those who desire to understand, they can understand this. Whether they are Muslim or not Muslim, whatever their direction in life, if they desire to come forth to understand that revelation which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has given to mankind, to follow the examples of the prophets, they will come into this enlightenment. And this is why the tragedy of Karbala was so great. And why it still remains to be a sad and tragic moment, that even after such sacrifice, you still have people who remain in Jahiliyyah and enlightenment, not understanding the reason for which Imam Hussein sacrificed himself. Not understanding that sacrifice was there so that we may reform ourselves and take ourselves out of the situation and period of unenlightenment, of Jahiliyyah. That imagine that if we truly had seen what happened, if we truly had saw the aftermath of what happened, so that we can grasp the understanding of Karbala, so we can grasp the understanding of what happened after Karbala as the caravan of the Ahlul Bayt were being taken from Kufa to Sham. That those who wanted to open their eyes, they saw and they understood. It is stated that as the caravan moved closer to Damascus. He said there was one stop that was outside of Damascus, just closer to Damascus. And when the caravan came close, it is stated Kulthum, she went to Shimr and she asked Shimr, she said, "Oh Shimr, I am not a person that will request anything from anyone, and especially from the likes of you. But just do one thing, that as we enter into Damascus, take us from a gate, from a door, which many people, they do not come in and out of this gate, this section of Damascus, so that the daughters of Rasulullah may maintain their dignity, that you've taken from us our hijab, that you have killed our menfolks, so take us from that place, that there are not many people entering from this gate, and there are not many people exiting from it." But as Shimr, he heard this, he ordered that the captives be lined up, that take them and place the heads of the shuhada upon the spears and place it in the center of the caravan. And this was opposite of when they went to Kufa. When they went to Kufa, the heads were placed ahead. But when they were going into Damascus, it was placed in the center, so that everyone would see it, and they would see the women, and they would see the heads, to make more of a spectacle of what was going on. They said as they began to move towards Damascus, that right on the outskirts, right a few feet out, there was one priest. He came and he saw. He was Christian. He saw this and he asked, he says, وَمَا الَّذِي مَعَكُمْ, that who is this with you? Who are these women? Who are these children? Who are these heads that you have upon spears? And it was responded to him that this is هَذَا رَأْسُ الْحُسَيْنِ ibn Ali. So this is the head of Hussein ibn Ali. And then this priest, he asks one question. He says, "Allow me to ask one question." He says, وَمَنْ أُمُّهُ, and who is the mother of this Hussein ibn Ali? And they responded, his mother is Fatima. And then he says, "This is Fatima, the daughter of your prophet?" And they said, "Yes." And then this priest, he says, "La hawla wa la quwwata illa billah. قَدْ صَدَقَتِ الْأَخْبَارِ." He says, "Oh, there is no strength except for that with Allah." He says, "Truly the prophecies that we heard have come true." And they asked this priest, he says, "What prophecies have you heard?" And this priest, he says, إِذَا قُتِلَ الرَّجُلُ إِذَا قُتِلَ هَذَا الرَّجُلُ مَطَرَتِ السَّمَاءِ دَمًا. He says that we heard a prophecy from long ago that the sky will rain blood when someone, a man of honor, will die, when he will die. He says, and truly this has happened. He says that only a prophecy will come about someone who is a prophet, or who is a son of a prophet, or who is a son of the saint of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, bin awliya Allah. He says, and today we see that this prophecy has come true, that you have disgraced yourselves, that you are the ummah of Rasulullah, of Muhammad, and you kill his grandson, you kill the son of his daughter. And then he began to wail and he began to cry. وَعَجَبًا عَلَى أُمَّةٍ قَتَلَتْ ابْنُ بِنْتِ نَبِيِّهِمْ. That woe be unto the ummah, that nation who has killed the son of the daughter of Rasulullah, of their prophet. And when the women and children, they begin to hear this, they begin to cry and they begin to wail. وحسين وحسين ونبيا على لعنة الله على قوم الظالمين وإنا لله وإنا إليه راجعون وسيعلم الذين ظلموا وأي منقلب ينقلبون اللهم بحق هذه المجلس الحسينية اغفر ذنوبنا واستر عيوبنا واقضي حوائجنا واشف مرضانا وارحم أمواتنا وعجل فرج مولانا صاحب العصر والزمان واجعلنا من أعوانه وأنصاره والمستشهدين بين يديه وتحت لوائه. Allah, by the blessing of this majlis for Imam Hussein, forgive our sins, cover our shortcomings, grant us our needs, our hajat, have mercy upon our deceased ones, give shafa and cure to our ill ones, and hasten the reappearance of Imam Zaman, and make us among his helpers, his companions, and those who will sacrifice our lives for him. آخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين. ماتم Hussein.
Brothers and sisters, inshallah, let's move to Hall A. As soon as the Urdu program is finished, the Sunday school children have created a play, and the stage is set, so we just travel that direction, please. Bahar Muhammad Wali Muhammad Salawat.